My name is Irene Gadiaka. I'm the CEO and founder of Nairobi Business Forum. We have our website. You've been there. You've registered. It's not the first time we've worked together. Why it is that you feel that we have a meeting of minds when we are doing events like this, and why it's especially important for APA to do what we do in the market.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Grace Masharia, Head of Marketing for APA Apollo. So why we agreed to do this event together with Nairobi Business Forum is we understood that the last 3 years have been really challenging for most businesses. And for Irene, and this is not the first time we've done this together, for Irene, she's doing something that is very, very important, something educational. And we felt in the same space as APA and the group that we are, where you are and the kinds of solutions that we offer to you are important for your businesses, for your personal lives, and we felt like a partner like that puts like-minded individuals, like everyone in this room, for us to have conversations about experiences and the things that are happening in businesses as well as personal lives that can improve for all of us. And as a group, we are the happiness brand. As you know, we are ensuring happiness, and your happiness is in your businesses, your families, your personal lives, and that is a solution that we bring for you. So it's exciting to be part of it, and we are very happy to be here, and thank you. The room is almost full. We are very impressed. We were worried at first, and then we were worried that there would be too many people, so it's exciting to be here. I don't know where Irene is. I can keep blabbering. I know she's left me with the mic. I can sing. All right, thank you so much for coming, and we'll keep talking more onto the group.
What I'm expecting from today is just to open my frame of mind, because the main reason why these events are important is to try and shift your thinking towards a better direction. And basically, I think that's what I'm expecting to get this evening. Thank you.
Bonsoir. My name is Andre from Bonjour Institute. Of course, I cannot pass up the chance to plug my business with such an esteemed congregation. So basically, I'm hoping to learn how to scale Bonjour Institute to the point where we can turn Kenya, first of all, into a country that is both Anglophone and Francophone, and basically achieve our goal of having one united Africa where we both speak English and French. Thank you.
We had so much fun, Irene.
And now we can officially consider this session started. But before we get Michael on stage, there are some names that I would like to mention. Some future speakers that we will be meeting as we go along. And one of them is Dr. Sai Gitoho. Dr. Gitoho, just stand and wave. Dr. Gitoho told me something I would never even have considered, that apparently when it comes to business succession planning, women are better at it than men. Imagine that. Yeah? Yeah, I thought, wow, yeah, we need to dig deeper, find out why or what our culture is doing to not enable that. And then next to her is Ila and Arun. Arun, I'll ask you to stand because you were here last time. Arun Divani, the chairman of Sin Races, and he will come back a second time because when he talked and told us that there was a time in Kenya when they used to tax dividends at 90%, that was unbelievable, even for me. 90, you earn your money and 90 of it, well, dividends goes to government. Yeah, so they used to tax it. Well, I don't know if there was ever anything left. Ashok, I will not ask you to stand because you're going to give a vote of thanks. I'm getting good at ambushing people. The CEO of Upper Group is here, and he's also part of the reason why we are here tonight. The partnership would not go as well as it did if it were not for that team. Then next to him is Alex McDonald. Alex, please stand. Alex is the Kenya ambassador No, the Barbados ambassador to Kenya. He will tell you about smart investing, and he will tell you about being tax efficient if you're going to Barbados. And if nothing else, he'll tell you about Rihanna, right? Yeah, that's true. So he's one of our speakers lined up. And then I ambushed you, so I won't talk to you. And I will not talk to you. But before I talk to you, Wandia Gichuru is on the, yeah, stand up. We like women startups because it's especially good when you can show by example that you're not just talking about it in theory. And so, Wandia, you're one of the speakers coming up. And the last one, who would not have made, we would not have made it up to this point if she hadn't been so helpful, just making sure that whatever would have been problematic would, comes out on top. Sophia, yeah, I know, ambush again. Sophia Onyango. And she's head of programs at Safaricom, and basically just one of the few people that you want to work with when you're on the clock. And so I wanted to ask you, Catherine, why is it that APA, we did, you remember we did that session on why we feel shortchanged about insurance and hospitals, and we don't know who to blame. The customer gets caught up in the middle. And a lot of that has brought us here. Why is it that APA felt the need to support this session with Michael Joseph? Thanks.
Yeah, my name is Catherine Karemi. I'm one of the CEOs in APA Apollo Group. And I would say for APA, we are a story of innovation and resilience. And this is what makes us walk the journey with our customers. And we feel even the story of Michael Joseph would be quite aligned to our story of going through different phases and growing it through and supporting our customers and our partners. APA this year celebrates 46 years of existence and growing strong. And we've been able to ensure our customers' happiness through our innovative solutions that cut across health insurance, which you've mentioned, and other insurance solutions that we offer. Businesses like the ones represented here go through challenges. When we look back to 2020, we know what happened to us when COVID hit us. Yes, and actually it taught us a lot to be innovative and to be resilient. And we support businesses in that aspect through the innovations that we do to make sure that the businesses and the lives of people go through that resilience. Actually, resilience is being able to bounce back from a challenging situation. And innovation is looking for new methods and new ways of doing things. And for APA, we are known for that. And we want to make sure that through our innovation, we support businesses to become resilient. Thank you very much.
A bigger hand than that. And now, we are not going to waste time. Those who will join us will do so as we continue. I will ask you to stand, just stretch, but also give a very warm welcome to our speaker for today, Mr. Michael Joseph. Michael, very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, Michael, we are going to go way back as in where you grew up and where you went to school and how you decided that you were going to be in telecoms, and then you found your way here. So walk us through that and your support system with your family and what it was like then.
Okay, I wrote this all down on my iPad in case I forgot where I started from. But the iPad is over there.
Yeah.
So I don't think I need it. I'll try to remember where I came from. Okay. So I was born in South Africa a long time ago. And I had a very unimpressive schooling. I barely made it through high school. Had actually very poor academic results in high school, mostly because I went to a school that I hated very much. So I didn't even try very hard. I spent most of my time daydreaming about flying somewhere by myself somewhere. Anyway, because of in those days in South Africa, you had mandatory military training. So before I went for that, because I was too young when I graduated from school, I did a telecom apprentice at what's called telecoms. I did an apprenticeship there for 3 years. And then when I finished that, I had to go to mandatory military training for another 2 years. And when I came back, then I kind of found that I should do more with my life than just be a telecom technician. So I decided to go to university.
Oh, you decided to go to university. So you did eventually find your way there. And did you work for any bit of time in South Africa?
Yeah, I did. I graduated. I went to university a long time ago. Okay, I don't even remember when I started there. I graduated in the early 70s. I graduated from UCT.
Yeah, okay.
I did a civil and electrical degree there. And then I had to do, because I'd got a bursary, I had to work for another 2 years for the state.
Yes.
And then after that, I went to work for a big engineering company. And I did very big projects in South Africa on the railways, on telecoms, and many, many big projects like power lines and things like that. And then for lots of reasons, political, personal, I decided to leave South Africa in 1986.
Yeah.
And so then it was to go. The question of leaving was not. It was just a question of that the political pressure on me was getting stronger because I went to a very liberal university, University of Cape Town. You were targeted in those days for being a liberal. I worked in a big construction company where the laws of the land said that you could only have white people in charge, and I didn't have that. I had black people who were in charge. It was very trying times, and also there were a lot of bombs and things like that. So I decided to leave South Africa and went to America. It was probably a very disastrous time for me to go there because in the end I made all the typical mistakes that an entrepreneur would make because I started a company in the US, in Columbus, Ohio, with some friends of mine who I'd met during my work. Because previous to that I'd worked in the US, I'd worked in the Middle East, I worked in Australia. So I'd met some friends in the US. It was just at the beginning of the fiber optic boom in the US. They were laying fiber optic cables all over America. And I wanted to join that. And I joined with some friends of mine. We started a company. Because then in those days, to get into the US, you had to get a visa. And the only way you could get a visa if you invested very challenging times. Anyway, it was a disaster. So within 1 year,
it folded.
I lost all my money, and all the money I'd saved, all the money I'd for my pension, and all that sort of thing I lost, and so I had to start again, and from scratch. And the temptation, of course, was because it was quite lonely in the US. The US is a big place. When you come from South Africa, it's like moving from here to America. You even get lost in a supermarket. It's so challenging. You want to buy bacon, and there's not like one brand of bacon. There's like 42 brands of bacon. Just stressful just to choose where to live, how to live. Anyway, for many reasons which I won't go into now, one day it will appear in a book of mine, I decided to leave Columbus, Ohio and move to Atlanta, Georgia. And then by happenstance, I happened to see this job in the newspaper advertised to be an international project manager for a mobile phone company. And mobile phone was just starting in America. This is now in 1987, 1988, so in that time. And just by happenstance, I saw this job advert. I applied for the job, went for an interview. But before I went for an interview, I didn't know anything about mobile phones and what was called cellular technology in those days. It was quite complicated. It was analog. It was not digital. And of course, we didn't have Google and all those things in those days. It seems amazing that it was just the other day, it seems like. But anyway, you didn't have Google, went to the local library, looked it up in Popular Mechanics, if you remember, anybody remember what Popular Mechanics was about, and looked it up there, what was mobile all about, studied that, went for an interview. And then, luckily enough, the guy who interviewed me had just come back from a safari in South Africa, And all he wanted to talk about is his safari in South Africa. And that's all he wanted to talk about. He didn't want to talk about who I was, what did I do, what experience. And so he eventually just hired me. And that was my start in mobile communication. So it just shows you by the way, are these slides showing here? Can you just check? Are they showing or not?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, not yet. Okay,
yeah.
they will. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So that's where I was hired, and I started my career in mobile.
Yeah. Then you went to Hungary.
No. Oh, you're jumping a gun.
Okay.
About 20 years.
That's 20 years later.
No, I joined the company and sorry. Like in the United Nations here, you know. So no, I started to bid for international mobile licenses around the world, mostly in Europe at that time because mobile was just starting. I mean, it's the early days of technology of GSM, what we call GSM today. Bidding for licenses in Korea. I spent a year in Korea, in Greece, and Germany, Italy, many places. And then we gravitated to South America. So I spent another year in South America bidding for mobile license, and we won a license in Argentina. And this is a story, it's still an interesting story. The way they awarded licenses in those days was called a beauty contest. You didn't put money in, you just, who was the best company to do the job. And the criteria in Argentina was, how fast could you build a network? And that was the only criteria. And they had this crazy formula. I'm sure you probably will resonate with this. But they had this stupid formula that said, if you built the whole country in 30 days of license award, you got 100%. If you built it took a year, you got like 98%. Or for 2 years, 95%. It was a very stupid formula. But my boss at the time said he wanted a guaranteed win.
Of 30 days.
He said, we put in 30 days. That we'll cover the entire country in 30 days from day of license award. This is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole of Argentina, it's 4 times bigger than Kenya.
I know.
Anyway, so we submitted the bid. We won the bid. There was a lot of protests because they said, look, you can't do it. It's impossible. But we had put in a $500 million bid bond. So if we didn't do it, we would lose the bid bond. Anyway, I was given the job to build this network in 30 days. So actually, it was quite interesting. We actually, while we were submitting our bid to the government for this license, we were actually sending by ship. All the cell sites were on a ship being assembled on this container ship, sailing from New Jersey down to Argentina. So we were building the sites. We were so confident we would win. We actually were building the sites already. We shipped in every single tower that we could find around the world in huge Antonov planes. Anyway, long story short, they only awarded the license to us in the following year in March or April. They awarded the license to us because it took time to set up the companies and get the license. So we had a 4 months head start. And we finished the building the network, which was certified by, in those days, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. Yeah. They actually certified that we built every single cell site, and we finished the job in June of the following year. So 6 months later, we built the whole of Argentina.
Yeah. A
complete disaster of a network, of course. It had to be rebuilt again. We spent a huge amount of money. Anyway, then after Argentina, I went to Sao Paulo. I went to Brazil. Then I went to Peru, and I did the same in Peru and in Brazil. And then I decided that I wanted to go to Europe. So I went to Spain, spent some time in Spain. And then after some challenging times, I eventually ended up in Hungary.
Okay, now we are in Hungary. Okay.
And this is just before the year 2000.
Yeah. And from what I remember, you told me that you weren't exactly looking to leave Hungary.
Okay, so I was the CTO, the Chief Technical Officer of the network in Hungary. I built a network in Hungary. It was also a very quick build. We had to do it in about 6 months because of license conditions and things like that. It's a long, complicated story, but I won't tell you that story. But I didn't want to leave Hungary. I wanted to stay there. First of all, they have opera every night in the spring, and I love opera. And there's always, every night there was a new opera. Also, I was single at the time when the most beautiful girls in the world lived in Hungary. So I didn't want to leave Hungary. I wanted to become the CEO of Hungary, of the company in Hungary. But they said to me, you can't because you don't have the personality, the diplomatic skills to be a European CEO. We'd have to send you to finishing school before you could become a CEO of a European company.
And that was that. You'd have to go to finishing school before you...
But they didn't mean they'd send me there, but they just said, you're not good enough to get this job. And then, once again, by happenstance, I was sitting on a bus going to a Vodafone event somewhere, and the guy sitting next to me said, we've just signed a deal between Telkom Kenya and Vodafone for a JV of a mobile phone company in Kenya. And I said to him, just sitting next to him, chatting while we were going to the function, I said, I wouldn't mind going to Kenya. But I mainly wanted to come to Kenya because of the Mara.
Everyone has a reason. Yours was the Mara.
The Mara.
Yeah.
And then the next day I got a call to come in for an interview for the job.
Yeah. And what I remember you saying is that, so they give you the job, but not a whole lot of money to start.
Well, I don't think they really had faith either in Kenya or myself to do this job. So they kind of said, okay, well, go and do this job. We don't think you'll do more than 300,000 customers in 5 years.
Oh.
So we won't give you a lot of money to start with. They only gave us $20 million. And as you know, $20 million doesn't go very far. And they didn't think we would be successful. So they sent me. I came with 5 other people from Vodafone. And we set up office in Norfolk Towers.
Norfolk
Towers, in a flat, in an apartment.
Yeah, the flats behind here.
In an apartment.
Yeah.
All 5 of us in this apartment. And we had inherited the Telkom Kenyan Safaricom network, which is about 12 base stations in Nairobi, completely congested. 16,000 of very unhappy customers, congestion, very expensive, etc., etc. So that was our starting point in Kenya.
Let's go back a little. Safaricom, the name, did you have anything to do with that?
No, as I said to you earlier, the decisions we made earlier about in the beginning of Safaricom, you must remember that we didn't have the data that you have today. We didn't have Google. We didn't have economic data about who lived where, how old they were, how much money they earned. There was very little economic data, so you had to make guesses about who would be your customer, what kind of customer were you going to look for. And we had a competitor. We had what the hell was the name of the company? You should know. Yes, you probably bought their SIM card.
Which one is that?
What is his name?
Bertie.
No, before Bertie. Vivendi. You remember that?
Vivendi.
Yeah, I remember. They only sold to Indians, by the way, because
did you hear that? They only sold to Indians.
That was their customer base.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they were ahead of us, and they already had a lot of money, and they'd started building their network before we did. So the decisions you had to make right at the beginning were decisions you had to make in a hurry, and you had to make them with very little data. So I think if you look at the success of Safaricom today, of course, it's easy to say, yes, that probably was the right thing to do. But those days, it was just wild guesses as to whether you were right or wrong.
Yeah.
So one thing I decided is Safaricom, I would keep the name Safaricom because it meant something. It was Swahili. It meant it was a Kenyan company. Although we were 40% owned by foreigners, that was Safaricom. If you remember, the early colors of our brand was the colors of the Kenyan flag. That was also,
who remembers that?
Mm-hmm. You should see the presentation if it ever works. So it was the colors of the Kenyan flag, and those are the two. And I remember going to a presentation by an advertising agency. I won't mention their names here. Anyway, so I went to this long presentation, and advertising agencies, they just give you lots of PowerPoint presentations.
Yes.
There's normally must be a triangle with a circle around it for sure. If you've seen these fancy things, I'm sure you've seen lots of these fancy presentations, and there's always a triangle, circles and things, and I said, it's just a waste of time. Just tell me, what is this company going to be called? What is going to be our strapline? That's all I wanted to know. And so they came up with all very fancy things. And I said, no, I wanted to be the better option. Yeah. Not the best option, the better option. So there's always going to be aspirational at some point. I want the colors of the Kenyan flag, and I want it to be called Safaricom. And my target market at that time, I thought, should be the man and woman who came to work in a matatu. That was my target market. Not the top echelon, because I didn't have a billing system anyway. So we were forced into that decision because we didn't have a billing system that you could pay monthly. We only could afford a prepaid billing system.
That's
choice
how
was
you
forced on
targeted
me. Yeah.
that market.
And then we decided to have SIM cards, scratch cards that were low denomination.
Yeah.
Remember, there were terrible scratch cards. The Big Five was, I remember, really, very bad decision there. And then and the other big thing we decided was going to be per second billing.
Yes.
Per second billing is actually an expensive option in one way, because if you bill per minute, you're always rounding up to the minute. So if you speak for 30 seconds or 40 seconds, you will pay for a full minute.
Yes.
And same if you speak for 90 seconds or 62 seconds, you'll pay for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So actually it gives you 20 to 25% more revenue if you bill per minute. But we decided to bill per second. I remember my shareholders, Vodafone, were horrified with that because it was a brand new concept. Not even South Africa were doing per second billing.
Yeah.
We were the first in Africa to do per second billing. But I thought, these are poor people. I remember them coming to work. I had an offer when I looked at the petrol station. I remember my first Safaricom building, down here somewhere, the first one. And there was a petrol station opposite there. And I saw people coming queuing up to put petrol in, and then even queuing up again. And I thought, what is going on here? So, people came to work in those days and put 100 shillings in and then go. And then they would go home at night and put another 100 shillings in.
Yes.
They didn't put 200 shillings in the morning.
Yes.
And so I thought that people want to pay as little as possible and bill per second. So per second billing was a decision. And then having free customer care center, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. My competitor had only 5 days a week in business hours, and you had to pay for the call. Of course, we had lots of calls into customer care in the first days because, of course, none of you read the manual. So when you get a phone, you call the customer care center, how do I switch this on, or whatever it was. So we had lots of calls, people asking, intelligent questions, I should say now, because it's diplomatic here. And lots of people just called just for the hell of it, because they could, because it was free.
They could call somebody and you're not being charged
and
for it.
they're not being charged. They'd call and find what's the weather like in Nairobi and all these sort of things. Yeah. So that was a good decision, so that people could call, they were confident, and we introduced low-cost phones.
Yeah.
So those are the big decisions that we made in the early days, which really contributed subsequently to the success of the company.
Tell me about how most Kenyans, at least in those days, tended to talk on Friday between 6 and 5. 6 and 8.
So, as I said, we had very little money when we begin with. We had a $20 million investment, which in those days didn't go very far. We were still struggling to get vendor financing for the equipment that came in, and eventually it did come in, and then we did a bond in 2003. But initially, we didn't really have enough money for the number of customers we were acquiring. So we had more customers than the equipment could cope with, quite frankly, for some periods of the day. So, we could have stopped selling, but we couldn't. I was too ambitious to get ahead of, what is the guys called, Vivendi? What is it called, the Pink Network? I really wanted to beat them, so I want to keep selling. But really, the capacity of the network was not good enough to handle the peak hours. And the peak hours was always 6 o'clock, 6 to 8. And that's when people start to go home and make a phone call or mostly get stuck in traffic on Waiheke Way
and that's
in
when
those
they
days.
Call.
And that's when they call, I'm going to be late for supper or whatever it may be. And Fridays was really bad. And, we had a lot of congestion. And of course, I couldn't go and tell people that, we haven't invested enough in this network, it's still coming. So I just had to deal with it. And of course, that's when the famous saying came when I supposedly said on TV that Kenyans have peculiar calling habits. But what I meant to say is, why can't they call at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock in the morning? Why do they wait till 6 o'clock?
And all of them at the same time.
Yeah, and all of them at the same time. Yeah. So that was where that came from.
We wanted to hear about, maybe not in a very long version, but basically 16,000 is where you started. And then here we are at more than 35. Walk us through, in snapshots, the first 10 years. How incremental was it? And allow me to go and sort that out while you tell us about that.
It would be nice to get the slides, because I didn't have any presentation, but it's just pictures from the early days of Safaricom.
Yeah.
And some of you may remember those days of what we did. Yep. But really, so you want to go? Okay. So it was mainly, growing the network. First, it was to get to 1 million. And we got to 1 million customers, I think, in 2001. We started in August 2000. I think beginning of 2002, we got our first million customers. And then the growth was exponential because we focused a lot on building the network. That was the big thing. We invested a lot on just building the network out as fast as we could build it. And of course, as you build it out, people get onto the network. I remember we put I remember putting a base station up in northeastern Kenya. And Somalis are absolutely the best customers you can possibly have because they love to talk and forever, And we put a base station up near Manda Bay, if you know, in Lamu, up in that area. I think we put it up day one. From day one, it was congested. The minute we switched it on, it was congested. And, it was just that growth of people getting phones, their friends getting phones, and that's how we exponentially, the network grew. Of course, we made it easy for people to buy a SIM card. You just walk into a shop, you pay your money, and I don't even think we had an ID card at that time, or you needed an ID, you just paid your money and you got a SIM card and you got a number and off you went. And that was a phenomenal success in Kenya. Of course, we had lots of advertising campaigns, a lot of promotions, a lot of interesting promotions. But those were interesting days. I mean, exciting days, nervous days. You don't remember, but there's an interesting incident. First of all, we launched the network on, I forget the day, 20-something of August, which was a Saturday night. And on Monday, the network collapsed completely because they'd underestimated the number of customers and the database was full straight away. But what happened was in April of 2003, or 2002, sorry, I'd got the money from the Belgian Export Credit Bank, and now I could buy a switch and I could install another switch, so we had an enormous amount of capacity, I thought. And so I did this thing that is live in infamy now, is that I wanted to reward all my customers for their patience for all this congestion. So what I did was secretly, overnight, I put 200 bob on everybody's number, secretly, okay? I did it after midnight, okay? I didn't say to anybody, it just appeared on your phone, and that was a reward. In the next day's paper, I was going to say, thank you for your loyalty, putting up with us, here's 200 bob free. In those days, I think we had, 800,000 customers or something like that. So it was quite an expensive thing to do. But it was airtime, so it was my airtime, so it didn't cost us a lot of money. But what happened is somebody was sitting at this time, that night, kindly calling 144, I think, was text to check your balance. Okay, 144, so 144, check. He's got 200 shillings. So this is fantastic. But what happened was the guy who was uploading the credit onto each phone, he was doing it from Dubai. And remember, we didn't have fiber optic in those days, it was satellite. And he'd got to sort of the 300,000 customer and the network would break. So he'd dial up again and start again, but instead of starting from 300,000, he started from zero. Okay? So every time this happened, and this happened a lot, I think it happened 4 or 5 times. So every time this guy dialed 144, first he had 200 bob, then he had 400 bob, then he had 600 bob. So this is 2 o'clock in the morning, bear in mind. I mean, who this was, I don't know. But suddenly the word spread in Kenya overnight, in this early hours of the morning. Even John Ngulu got a call to say, check your number, dial 144 and you get 200 shillings credit. And this spread right across the country. And then suddenly there was all these people adding. And so at about 5 o'clock in the morning, the technicians called me and said, there's something wrong. The network is jammed. So I came, our first switch was down here in our first building in Waikiki. And we were sitting there looking at each other stupidly, what the hell is going on? And then we realized what was happening was this, some people now had 800 bob on their phone. And can you imagine the cost to the company? It was a scary time. So then I started to reverse it. I said, okay, reverse it. So then people saw their balances decrementing from by 200 bob. First they had 800, now they had 600. So now they're trying to spend it.
Before it
was gone. So then the network was jammed even more. So for 1 week, we had a completely jammed network. And people were shouting at me in the street about it, because you couldn't make a call. The network was completely jammed.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had funny times like
funny
that.
Times. Yeah. And then we are what was the subscription then about?
It was about 800,000, so it cost us a huge amount of money if that had been successful. I hadn't managed to reverse it.
What was the incremental growth year on year?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe there's a slide here one day if they ever get the act together. If they were my staff, I would fire them by now, but they're yours, so I can do nothing about it. Yeah. Anyway,
Then here we are. We are doing all right. Safaricom is leading in many ways, and then you decide that you're going to step down as CEO, and you decide to hire Bob Collymore. How was that?
let me step back because I think it's an important step that we didn't talk about, which is M-Pesa.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think it's important to remember or to clarify how M-Pesa started in Kenya, because there's many fathers and mothers of M-Pesa, and I actually call myself the mother of M-Pesa. In 2006, a guy called Nick Hughes, who actually started M-Copper, if you remember M-Copper,
yes,
subsequently. So Nick, there was a grant from DFID at the time to deepen the financial, to applications for companies to deepen the financial penetration for the unbanked. Long chapter, long title. And Nick applied for this, and he came up with this idea for the microfinance industry to use a product that could disseminate tiny loans and then repay those tiny loans. Because, you know, the repayment and management of loans in microfinance is quite expensive. Yeah. So he came up with the idea to use the mobile phone to do this. So he tried to flog this to all the other Vodafone companies to test it somewhere. And so nobody wanted to do it, so they came to see me. And because I was so wanting the company to be innovative, I thought, okay, let's try it, let's do it. And we tested it in Thika. So we tested this with the microfinance company and so on, and it was successful. But what happened was people would receive the money from the microfinance company, say 1,000 bob loan, but they also had a facility, a menu structure that they could send that money to somebody else who was the real recipient of the money.
Yes,
okay?
Yes.
So people were using this facility to send money around. It wasn't sending, they were just using this facility. They thought it was wonderful. So my staff came to me and said, look, the people are doing, why don't we do something more of this? And that's when we decided to change that product to be what is now called M-Pesa, to send money home. That was our first product and we launched that in 2007. Now, whilst we were doing all this, my main shareholders said, this is an absolute waste of time. You will never make any money out of this. It will be terrible. But I didn't want to make money. I thought it would be a product that would help people, change people's lives for the better, and therefore they would stay with the company. So they would...
Retention.
It was retention, but it was more that I wanted to create this love for the company. Yeah. So you'd create a product that was so useful to them and benefit them so much that they would always stay with you. Yeah. In the first year of 2000, there's a story, there's even a book written on this, is that I said I wanted 1 million customers. And if you don't get 1 million customers, I'm going to fire all of you. But to get 1 million customers cost $10 million.
Yes.
That was the risk that we took, because you had to change the SIM card, you had to pay commission, etc., etc. So it was a huge risk. But in the end, it was usually successful.
How did you decide that your team was largely local? The distributors, everyone that was perhaps part of that value chain, a lot of them, including middle management, senior management, even most of them were Kenyan. Well, that's not exactly the blueprint that you had in other companies.
From Safaricom or the dealer network?
Yeah, from Safaricom and M-Pesa as well.
I think in Safaricom from very early days, we had very few expats.
Yes.
Very few. Maybe we started, as I said, we started with 5. I think by 2007, maybe we had 2, including myself and the CFO.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a lot. But I think what made M-Pesa successful was the entrepreneurial spirit of Kenyans. You know, when I advertised for dealers, my telecom dealers, the mobile phone dealers, didn't want to be anything to do with M-Pesa, because you had to come in and register with your ID card.
Yes.
You had to make a copy of it. You had to do a SIM swap. So they didn't want these people cluttering up their shops, as they said. For what? This stupid product that we were launching. So I advertised in the newspapers for entrepreneurs, and they all came. So my first bunch of dealers in M-Pesa were just, people with dukas and all sorts of things, who just created a business. But what I wanted to do was each M-Pesa dealer in every town, and I wanted to have at least 5 in every town. So I wanted to say, if you wanted to put your money into the M-Pesa system or take your money out, you don't have to walk more than 100 meters. That is my philosophy.
Okay.
So you have to just like Starbucks, you know.
Yeah.
You turn around in the corner, there's a
There's
Starbucks.
one. Yeah, it's
but
one
coffee's
somewhere.
not so great, but you know, there's an M-Pesa outlet. And that's what our success was, the number of M-Pesa outlets.
And then we can talk about Bob Colimona, right?
Okay, with some difficulty.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I'd known Bob before because Bob was on our foundation, on Safaricom Foundation as a director. He was also a director of Safaricom because he was heading up Vodacom International Business,
Yes.
or Vodacom External Affairs or something like that. So I'd known Bob and I knew who he was. And when I knew I was going to step down, and this is the third time I was going to step down, we did an international search and we really didn't find the person I thought would really understand Safaricom. Because remember, by then, Safaricom was a household name. You know, we had 85% market share.
Yeah.
You know, we had, you know, it was big. And everybody knew Safaricom mostly because of our CSR activities, which is another story about how successful we were because of CSR. So everybody knew Safaricom. We had this brand love. We had this, you know, everybody trusted us, particularly because of M-Pesa. And I wanted to hire somebody that understood that DNA of Safaricom. Yeah. We were not just an ordinary company, and I hope we will never be regarded as just an ordinary company. We want to be a very special company. And we were in everybody's name, houses, and we were part of the family of people. So Bob, okay, Bob's not here now, but the corporate didn't want him. They said, no, he's not the right guy. You know, he's never had he's not a technical guy, etc., etc. But I wanted Bob because I thought Bob understood the DNA of the company. And so I pushed very hard for him to come to Safaricom. And then eventually, after lots of stubborn arguments, they capitulated. And Bob joined in 2011.
I will stick with that for a little bit and ask, for all of us who got to maybe interact with Bob in some way, some of us just on TV, but as we were talking, I remember that I was supposed to have him here address us, and I kept thinking to myself, I had enough time. Little did I know what was going on. And that was me feeling like that. I wondered, he was not just an employee or somebody you hired, he was a friend of yours. How did you deal with that, with losing him? Yeah, I know.
Okay, I have to pause here. So it's quite difficult because of course I was a friend of Bob's and I was on the board of Safaricom. I interacted with Bob a lot when he was when he was CEO of Safaricom. And you know, actually, I was going to fire Bob at one point. Actually, he doesn't know that, but we didn't know that because I thought he went too far in some of the things, the changes he wanted to make and things like that. But nevertheless, we grew to be friends.
Yes.
But really, we grew to be great friends and very close friends when he was in hospital. So to Bob, because he had what did he have? Cancer. The cancer that he had to be in isolation a lot. So he spent most of his 2 years of his when he was ill in isolation in London, in hospital in London. So you couldn't just, you know, when I went to see him, we had to put all the gear on and mask and things like that. And I spent days with him, and you know, we spent days just talking and life and all these sort of things. So I grew very close to him in that time. So it's a strange feeling now because you know, when he told me that he had stopped taking his medication, and he told me the week before that he had stopped taking the medication, that was it. You know, by then he was on experimental medication that had to be flown in, and he said, no, I'm not continuing because there was obviously no way cure for him. It was very hard. And then I remember the Safaricom Marathon was on a Saturday.
Yeah.
On the last Saturday in June, and I called him, and I finished the marathon. And he was very excited, and he died the next day.
Oh, wow.
It was very hard. Particularly because then I had to come back and then take his job.
Yeah.
It was quite tough, yeah. It was very tough.
Let's
You know, he was a special guy, you know.
He was.
You know, people loved him.
Yeah. I remember
He wasn't the greatest CEO, but he was a great guy.
Yeah, I do remember social media is such that I do remember some people saying, I've never even met this guy and I'm crying because he's gone. So that's the kind of guy I think he was. Now, let's
You know,
get...
somebody sued me in the court, you know, because at his funeral, at his memorial service, and I said to him, you know, I always said, Bob is a black guy who just can't dance. You know, he thought he could dance because he was black, but he actually couldn't dance. And I said this during his memorial service. Yes. Some guy sued me in court for saying something racial or something like that. But, Bob was, it was quite interesting. I have to tell you a story about Bob. You're saying I must tell you a story. So.
And I'm sure he would have loved it. He would have loved it.
So Bob came to see me in my home. You know, I have a home in Lawa. And he spent one weekend with us up in Lawa. And we went for a walk with the dogs and everything like that. And we were walking back to the house. And I was stopping. I was just looking at on the horizon. And I said, I had binoculars. And I said, oh, there's 2 lions up there. So as the minute I said 2 lions up there, the rest of my family just ducked and gone. Yeah. They ran away. They were up the road, up to the house. Bob stood next to me. I said, Bob, why don't you run away? He said, well, you've got a gun. And I had a little gun.
2 lions.
Anyway.
And so let's come back to perhaps where we are now. By the way, as we continue, who has a question for Michael? I asked who has a question for Michael. All right, I see you. What I wanted to know is, there are all these rumors in the market about separating M-Pesa from Safaricom. What's your view on that?
Well, it's clear. Well, why are we thinking of doing this? The challenge is that M-Pesa is regulated by the central bank.
Yes.
Telecoms is regulated by the CA.
Yes.
And so, but M-Pesa is closely intertwined with Safaricom. So it's basically, from a regulatory point of view, it would make more sense to put it into a separate own company with its own board. And so it can be regulated more easily by the regulator. Because the regulator, the banking regulator talks to the board of directors of Safaricom, but they are board of directors of the whole of Safaricom. It would be better for him to talk to a board of directors that's responsible just for M-Pesa. It's for no other reason. It's not just M-Pesa we want to separate out. We want to separate M-Pesa, we want to separate our tower business, our towers, so that we can share towers with other people, plus other companies.
Okay. Then we were going to ask, that is the Safaricom story, very rosy by anyone's accounts. You started very small, some people had no faith in you, and then to contrast that is you in KQ. I know. How did that happen? How did you go from, this is the CEO who we know brought Safaricom to where it was, where it is now, largely, and then he chooses to go to KQ. How did you manage that?
Okay, so obviously with the successful with Safaricom, it's still, that's my legacy, I guess, at that time. 2016 was my legacy of Safaricom. Kenya Airways was going through a difficult time, still is going through a difficult time. And then I was just asked by the president at that time, would I become the chairman of the board of Kenya Airways? I first said, why me? Well, you're so successful with Safaricom, you should be as successful with Kenya Airways. Well, it's a very different company, a very different legacy, balance sheet, etc. But for me, it was an intellectual curiosity because, I'm thinking now I've done Safaricom. I was doing other things. I ran Vodafone, mobile money for Vodafone across the world. And I was in London, very boring job, running mobile phone across the world. I don't like corporate life. But it was an intellectual challenge because I wanted to be, I always was interested in airlines and airports, and it was an intellectual challenge. I'd never done anything like that before, and I wanted to have that intellectual challenge, so I said yes. I'm not sure I would have said yes if I'd known how bad it was. And also the challenge that you have is everybody expects you to be successful.
Yes.
And now you go into this company that is struggling, and it's very difficult to get out of the struggle. And you have everybody with an opinion, and whenever a plane is late, you get told how terrible your airline is, or your plane is late, or you miss a plane, or the food is bad, or whatever. So you get all these criticisms about you. But it was something that I said I would do, and therefore I said I would stay and do it. So many times I've been told that, you're wasting your time, you should step down. But I gave my word to the president, and I believe that I should stick it out until I've made it successful.
What does that look like? Because to somebody observing from outside, it seems we are just allocating a whole lot of money to take you, but we don't see a point even where the losses get less and less.
But when you say a whole lot of money, it's just absolutely wrong. How much money do you think the government has given Kenya Airways in the last 5 years? How much money do you think? Anybody guess? Even during COVID, how much money?
15 billion.
15 billion what? Dollars?
Yes.
Dollars?
Yes.
You're very, very far wrong by a factor of 10.
Oh, wow.
So they have not given us this kind of money. The most money we got was in the middle of COVID. We got $10 million from the government, and actually I was promised 20. So, it's you should look at the facts. What the government did do in 2017 is convert their previous loans into equity.
Yes, they did.
They owned 49% of the company. But actually the bailout that they talk about, huge amounts of bailout, is not actually accurate. It's not that much money. And I would love to have been $15 billion, that's for sure. I don't think totally, if you go back 5, maybe 10 years, is it $100 million? Very unlikely. Okay, so that's the challenge that we have. And so this is, what does it look like? The challenge that we had in 2016-17 when I came on board was not strictly the operations of Kenya Airways, although there were some issues that we had to deal with in ground operations, timeliness, customer care. The biggest issue was, in 5 years previous to that, we had this big project called Project Mawingo, where we tried to build an airline that would rival Ethiopian.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the plan, called Project Mawingo. You're very late to the game, huh? Anyway, so that was, what happened was that we ordered a whole lot of planes, but they didn't come on time. If you remember, the 787 Dreamliner was 5 years late.
Yes.
5 years late. So we were going to be a launch customer together with Ethiopian of the Dreamliner. But it came 5 years later. In that 5-year intervening time, we had no wide-body aircraft. We had 767s, which were no longer allowed to fly into Europe.
Yep.
So we had to buy aircraft in a hurry, and we bought 3 777s, which are now at Turkish Airlines. But nevertheless, it cost us a fortune. $1.5 million each.
Each, yeah.
Each.
That I know, yeah.
And so we inherited this legacy of this debt that came onto our books, which when the aircraft did arrive, when the 787s eventually did arrive, and they all came one by one almost at once, which was a real disaster, then we had, if you remember correctly at that time, we had the Westgate
attack,
terrorist attack, where tourism went straight down. We had Ebola in West Africa, where we were not allowed to fly to West Africa, which is one of our most lucrative routes. We had the damn airport burned down. Yeah, remember? There were 4 things that happened at the same time, which really was put everything on Kenya Airways really badly. So we lost a lot of revenue during those times. And when I came in 2017, was trying to recover from that. And we're still, to this day, trying to recover from that. If you look at Kenya Airways today, operationally, thanks to many things, we are actually profitable. Operationally. So if you look at maybe not to get to EBIT, but when you get to before net profit, before you put into depreciation and debt, we're profitable. And of course, if you look at an airline, the average airline profit EBIT margin across the world, the average is 8%. 8. Safaricom, remember, is 50%.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. So you're at 8%. If you have weather-related problems, if you had oil price increase, which you've seen now because of the Ukrainian war, where the oil price went to $120 a barrel, if you have any of those things, bad weather, an incident, your profit's gone. So you're operating on very thin margins all the time. So you've got to be on top of your game all the time. And that means you have to have the right people, hire the right people, put the right aircraft, the right routes. And that's where what we're dealing with now. Yes, will we be successful, you're going to ask me?
Yes. Yeah, I'm
pretty confident that we will. It just is the debt that we've got to get over. And we also have to be protected. Because you look at what happened in South African Airways, I don't know if you look at the history, South African Airways is bankrupt, right?
It
Went
is.
bankrupt,
Has
went into
been for
business
a while.
rescue
Yeah.
for a while. Why did they go bankrupt? They were the market leaders in Africa and in Johannesburg,
Yeah.
okay? 40, 50 aircraft. The government allowed Emirates, BA, Qatar, to fly into Johannesburg airport twice a day with a 380.
Yeah.
A 380. How many seats in a 380? Can you guess? 800 seats in Emirates. 800 seats. Sometimes it's been how they configure it. But you know, a 777 is 400 seats.
Yeah.
And it's 1.5 times the 777. So they've got all these airlines flying in there who have to fill that aircraft, because once an aircraft takes off and you have a seat that's not sold, it's a lost sale.
Yeah.
And the government of South Africa allowed that to happen. So that killed SA. Because if you fly, you know where you want to fly to London. Fly direct to London, see how much the airfare is. Fly via Doha, fly via Dubai. It's half the price. Why?
Yes, it is.
Because they want to fill up that plane in Dubai or Doha or Addis or wherever it may be. So we have to make sure, and that's my caveat, to say, okay, if where we're going now are improving, we need to be, to some extent, protected. With all these guys crying and saying, we should have more flights to Mombasa. Guys, what about your national airline? Yeah? Protect your national airline first.
Yeah.
Because it is your national airline. And you know, and we have to think about this Kenya Airways. Sorry, I'll stop preaching in a minute, okay? I just want to make this point. Nairobi sits on the equator, virtually. We have the best schools in Africa. We have the best climate in Africa. We are right on the equator. We're in the middle of Africa. This is the best place for your business headquarters to be. International Africa Business Headquarters. Where are they all at the moment? In Dubai. Why the hell are they in Dubai?
Yeah.
It's a terrible climate. It gets 45 degrees or 50 degrees in the summer. You know, it's an awful place to live. Just a bunch of sand and whatever, and buildings and so on. Why are they there? They're there because of Emirates connectivity.
Yes.
If we lose out our airline, we will lose businesses coming to be hosted or headquartered in Nairobi. Stop. Lecture over.
Okay, yeah, and before we take questions from the guests, what's the exit strategy for everybody that's been converted to an equity investor as opposed to a debtor?
It's too early to say. We are, together with the new administration that we have now,
Yeah.
maybe we have more interest from the government in supporting us, and they've said it publicly.
Yeah.
Basically, our task is to find a strategic investor to invest sufficient funds into the airline so that we can merge out of this where we are now.
Debt, yeah.
Maybe go back to, I'm not sure that I want to be listed again on the stock exchange. It might be just...
Are they delisted or just hanging?
No, I would like to be delisted completely.
Completely.
Completely, because when you're a listed company, as you know,
Yeah.
you disclose everything to everybody.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that as an airline.
And let's get to the questions now.